This is Denise Malan from Investigative Reporters and Editors, and one of the best investigative resources that most of us could have. If you're not a member of IRE, consider the $70 cost, and you'll probably get more than that back. That's my sales pitch for you. And from here,
I appreciate it.
all to you.
Thank you, Steve. I'm actually going to show you some free resources as well, too, from IRE and elsewhere. So most of you, are you guys familiar with IRE? Yes? Okay, great. So we were founded in the 70s. We're a training and support network for investigative journalists, and we started back then with just a couple hundred journalists. We're about to hit 6,000 now, and our membership has been increasing over the last several years pretty rapidly, which is very encouraging and great to see. So what we're here to talk about today is, as our newsroom sizes are shrinking, how can we still keep working on this type of work? How can we work in watchdog type reporting in our day-to-day work, like going deeper every day? So as I go through this, there are a lot of links in here, and there's different examples, and there's different tools. I will give you guys a link to the slides at the end, so you will have all those. You don't have to worry about writing down everything I say. And please feel free to ask any questions or start discussions as we go along as well. First thing I want to talk about is why even do investigative work? Why are we here? We, a few years ago, actually commissioned a study at IRE because we're like, we love investigative work and we want to talk about it all the time, but do audiences actually like it? Is there actually a business case for doing this kind of work? And you'll see here, this is actually, this is Gallup polls over the last couple of decades here, looking at trust in news. And you'll see like it was pretty steadily going down, and this is like 2017, it was actually spiking there, which is pretty good. The top one here is television news, and the bottom one is newspapers. So we commissioned this study. It is a few years old now, 2013. I would love to see us do this again, actually. This link takes you to watch the whole presentation if you need to make this business case with your newsroom, with your publishers, or whoever you need to talk to. But these are the main points right here. We commissioned this study to ask readers, focus groups, like what kind of content do you want to see in news? And the top one, the top bar there is weather, which like, you're never going to beat that, I guess. That second bar there, though, is investigative. Like the number 2 thing that people want to see, and then business, health, politics, and on down the line. So customers actually say that investigative work builds trust in newsrooms. And again, this is a few years old. I feel like if we did this again this year, it would be even higher, I feel like. 62% of our respondents said that it was a reason to actually follow a particular news organization, that they follow them just for their watchdog work. Again, I'm going to go through, I have a lot of slides here. I'm going to go through things pretty quickly, but stop me if you want to talk about some things more. Then we dug a little deeper into investigative topics and asked people specifically, what do you want to see as far as accountability work? And these green bars here are the top things, and I would put them all almost in the same bucket of like government accountability, spending, waste, that type of thing. Also consumer scams and ripoffs. But all of these things on the slide are all pretty high interest. There's education, there's the justice system, there's police corruption, positive change, what is working. There's a lot of interest in those type of topics. This is the problem, right? We all have less and less, fewer and fewer resources, less and less money to do this type of work. And we see headlines like this, where I'm so glad news organizations are doing this, and some of them can do it, but they are spending ridiculous amounts of money, really, on like $750,000 on 2 years on one story. Right? It's amazing. Like, people need to be doing this kind of work, but we can't all do this in our newsrooms, in our local communities, right? And we don't have months or years, or sometimes even weeks to spend on a story. So the answer to this, and this is really what we preach at IRE, is create an everyday watchdog culture in your newsroom. Every reporter is an investigative reporter. This is what reporters do, right? We investigate. So create that culture in your newsroom and support reporters in doing this kind of work. These are all the points I'm going to make here. We're going to go through each one of these really point by point, but these are the main steps to take here. So Number one, asking the extra question. Every story should be an opportunity to ask a deeper question. Don't just go to the press conference and say what they said, right? Don't just cover the press release and copy and paste and put it in there. Think of every story as an opportunity for some kind of watchdog angle. So, number one, step to that, checking all the facts. Is what they're saying true? It's a basic thing, but all too often, we're writing 4 stories a day and we kind of just get in the habit of they said this and they said that, he said, she said, but what is actually true? What do the documents say? Ask people, ask your sources that extra question like, oh, where did you get that from, right? Where did you get that idea? Is that in a report? Do you have data? What is backing up your claim there? So what we're trying to get at there is evidence, right? Quantify things. Don't just ask for stories or anecdotes. Those are all good. Those can help people get in the story. But we're looking for what is the evidence, what is quantifiable about this story. Another way to do this is to think about issues in your community in some kind of context, nationally or statewide. A lot of times it's really easy. There's a lot more data available online now or reports from academics. Someone has studied an issue, and you can find pretty quickly where you guys rank with a certain issue, right? If there's a press conference about, or there's let's say like there's just a domestic violence murder in your community, and you're kind of thinking, oh man, this seems like this is a pattern in my community. You can put those things in context and see, are we really out of whack here? Let people know where you rank. Another great question to ask in a story is, who is being harmed? Who is responsible for that? Right? It leads to all kinds of other questions. The harm might not necessarily be what we think of as a true victim a lot of the times either. It could just be like the taxpayers are being harmed by this because their money is being wasted. Right? So think outside the box on that one too. Yeah.
Please stop me if you want to touch on this later in the presentation. One of the biggest challenges I sometimes think I face is that if the person I'm interviewing or doing a story suddenly realize I'm changing into a critical angle, and then suddenly they start withdrawing their quotes,
Wow.
How do you face that challenge?
Yeah, no, that is a great question because all sources can be different. And yeah, I wasn't really going to go into sourcing necessarily, but really depends on your relationship with that person. And a lot of times though, you start this with that relationship, and then you start getting into these, and I always try to start very nice. Like, oh, just tell me more about that, or like, where did you get that? I would love to see, what's backing this up. I'm just curious. Kind of start with that, like, oh, like it's just me, like asking you these questions. If things do start to get to where you think like, oh, this person is lying, and things could get maybe more contentious, it's kind of, you do have to balance that, like your responsibility is to the readers, right? And to tell to your audience, tell them what is actually happening. So sometimes you might burn bridges, or a source might be mad at you. But I would say my number one tip for that, for trying to keep the communication alive, is to no surprises for them. They should know what you're working on. You should ask them straight up the questions that you want the answers to. I'd say would be my number one tip to that. And then sometimes they'll get mad at you. It's just, part of the job. Absolutely. So I brought some examples too of the things that we're talking about in each of these habits. This is one of my favorite examples of quantifying a problem here. So the mayor in this city, this is in Skagit, Washington, the mayor was talking about this tequila bar that was going to go in downtown, and he's like, that location, there's so many police calls there, like we don't need this in our community, blah, blah, blah. So what's the natural question? How many police calls are there, right? And how does that compare to other businesses in the area? And so the data to get that is 911 calls, right? And see what's going out to that location. So this reporter quantified it, and this was in 11 years, there were 16 calls at that location. And then she said across the street at just like the regular sports bar, there were 471 in that same amount of time. So, spoiler alert, the mayor is a racist. He also, you'll see from the headline, he also wanted English to be the city's official language. So he had some issues. This is another great example of taking some data that police departments are required to report and then digging into that and saying, do they actually report it correctly? That's the kind of the next question out of that. So in Texas, every single police department is required to fill out these forms about, do we racially profile? Basically, they fill out the race of all the people they pull over, and they have to file reports saying like the different proportions. This television station in Austin, though, said like, well, how do they count the race of people? Like, do they do it correctly, right? Are these reports accurate? So they looked at the top names reported as white from the DPS, which is like the state troopers there in Texas. The number one white name was Smith, which is like, I could buy that. Then the next four are Garcia, Martinez, Rodriguez, and Hernandez. Were reported as white, not Hispanic. So that gets a little fishy, right? And they went out and they talked to people who were actually pulled over who were coded as white. And they're like, no, I'm totally Hispanic. No one asked me. Like, they just must have put that on there, right? So basically just cooking their books. So it's an example of taking data that is there and given for you and questioning it and saying, is that even true? And this was just a get the data and run some queries on it and find out what's going on. So those are examples of taking a story, asking that question. My next strategy here is following up on stories, following up on things. I feel like just as a whole, journalists are not necessarily always good at this. We will do a story or, we'll talk about an issue and then we move on to the next thing. It's the next deadline. It happens to all of us. I'm here to say you can get really great stories just by following up on issues. So if a politician or a candidate makes a promise, police chief, whoever it is, they say, we're going to reduce crime by 10% over the next year. The day he says that, make yourself that calendar item. This is literally how I would do it, to remind myself, in a year I need to come back and ask them, okay, what's the crime rate? And did it go down? Did they keep their promises? A lot of news organizations are doing this also about Trump and his campaign promises, and they're doing, scorecards, like how many promises did he keep? It's a great thing to do with your local politicians as well. What was the effect of a new law or a new ordinance in your city? We cover a lot of when they're, policy discussions, when they're considering new laws at the state legislature or at the city council. And there's a lot of conjecture and speculation about what's going to happen, and things are going to be ruined, things are going to be terrible. But how often do we come back and say oh, what really happened with this new law in a year or however long it is, whatever makes sense for that law, right? Do we say hey, people were right, things really fell apart here, or that didn't really come to fruition, things are looking okay here. If there's a big procedure or policy decision coming up, again, make yourself that calendar item to follow up on it later. Ooh, yeah, another one of my favorites. How much did that project actually cost in the end? How many times do cities, states sign contracts to build something, and we report on that amount, and it's going to cost X millions of dollars, and then when it comes down to it, it's oh yeah, well, we forgot, actually we have to put seats in the stadium. We have to put concrete on our road, and those things cost more money, and there's a lot of change orders, and there's a whole lot more money going out than they actually predicted that there would be. So come back at the end of a project and see how much did that actually cost. If there is some kind of, say, environmental issue or an OSHA investigation, some kind of regulatory investigation in your area. I used to work on the Gulf Coast in Texas. We had a lot of refineries, and there were these things all the time, right? Come back and see, did they pass a follow-up inspection? Did they fix that problem, right? If there was a workplace issue, someone was hurt, are they safe now? Some examples of these. How many of you guys cover public incentives in your communities? Giving, yeah, TIFs. tax incentives, right? Giving away public money for businesses, which is a way to entice businesses to come to your community. Absolutely. And it happens everywhere. But how many times are the promises actually met, right? If we're going to give you $10 million tax break and you say you're going to create 500 jobs in 2 years, did you? Right? It's just a question to be asked. This is a great story out of Columbia, Missouri, where IRE is based, where IBM came into town, and I forget the timeline there, but the newspaper followed up and found, hey, they didn't meet their promises, and it happens all the time. So when a company comes to town, get that contract, see what's in it. This is an example of just always getting the documents, right? See what's in it, see what timeline they have to follow, what reports they have to file, so you can follow up with those. Get all the information in the beginning so you can know when you need to follow up. Texas. Do we have Texas people in here? No Texas people?
We have a guy here covering Katie.
Okay.
He's not
Okay.
in this room.
Oh. Darn. Well, high school football, kind of a thing.
He was just talking about this.
What?
We all talked
Good. Good. Yeah. High school football is kind of a big thing in Texas. And so in Katy, which is outside of Houston, the voters there approved a football stadium for a high school for $58 million. Voter approved. They're okay with that. But it turns out that $58 million didn't include site work, like moving the dirt around, which you kind of have to do to build a stadium. And that was another $12 million. So actually $70 million for the stadium, like right off the bat. Which is like, how many actual schools could you build for that? Like, that's,
like you can get more than 12,000 seats. So.
yeah, it's also not, it's not really that big. 12,000 seats. Yeah.
Is there an independent source that you could suggest for decoding TIF agreements? Because sometimes they're not as clear as this is a great example, but besides the business itself, the organization itself, and the government attorney or the government.
Yes. So there is actually an organization here in Chicago that deals just with TIFs, in Chicago specifically, but they know everything about them. Tom Tresser at City Lab here in Chicago is just he knows more about TIFs than anyone I know, for sure. There is also a national organization called Good Jobs First that they are gathering all the public incentives that they can all across the country. So you can actually go there and search like your state and nationally. And the thing to keep in mind is like these are advocacy organizations. So they like Good Jobs First is against public incentives, but they have a lot of information there, right? So always like keep your sources' motivations in mind, but there's a lot out there.
At least if I can get a variety of motivations, it gives me a better context.
Yes, right. Talk to everybody you can. Yeah. And in this case, like when you're looking for the cost, the way to get the full cost a lot of times is asking for change orders to the contract or getting the check registers. The check registers are like the contract is here's what we say we're going to pay you. The check registry is like here's the money that actually went out. This is where we actually wrote the check. So think about whatever it is that you're covering. Think about what documents are created through the process of this issue and get your hands on them. All right, so that's following up. My next strategy here, background everyone. Now, you don't have to do a full, like, huge, spend hours looking at everyone who's in your stories. I would advocate for, like, a 15-minute background check on everybody. Everybody who, like, a feature story, a sports story, anyone you're doing. Definitely if you're doing a large feature on them, give them a good scrub. Because you don't know what's in their past. You don't know if they're telling you the truth about anything, honestly. Like, did they really graduate from that school they said they graduated from? Right? Do they say racist things on social media? Like, you want to know, like, if they have a criminal history, all of those things. Because it might affect your story in some way, depending on what it is. At the very least, you don't want to be caught flat-footed if something does come out about them after your story comes out. So think about think about maybe a standard checklist for your newsroom. Think about, I would say, social media, criminal history are like the top things, and Google everyone. Just start with a Google search, right? Where are they from? Who are they? Are they really this person? If you're covering, say, new principal, new superintendent, get their resume. Did they really go to these places? Think about court records. They declared bankruptcy if they're a business person. Do they give campaign donations? What might their motivations be? Whatever it is that makes sense for your story, you want to know what's in that person's background.
Just to add to that, a lot of these folks, I think, probably can't afford Lexis and Access necessarily, but the names of databases you probably have.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And I can give, I actually have a really good backgrounding checklist also that's completely free sources. If you do not have access to LexisNexis, it's all like, you can find people's cell phone numbers, you can find like criminal histories totally for free. I can give you guys that link at the end also. Yeah, that's a really great point. Some examples of backgrounding people. This is my hometown, Pittsburgh, Kansas. And this story went really viral a couple years ago. You guys remember this? When these high school students got the resume of their new principal and they Googled it, like the adults did not do. Their newspaper advisor, by the way, like sat on the committee to hire this person. So they and my mom teaches in this school district, so I got a lot of good backstory on this. But so these kids get it and they Google where she got her master's degree and they find out it's at a diploma mill. Like it just took a Google search, 2 seconds. But then what I love about it is they went further than that and they actually reported it out. And they called the county where this school supposedly existed and they're like, have no business records, right? They reported it out and found out this school does not exist. This woman is a liar. And she was fired before she even started. Divided my whole town. It was craziness. But I'm really proud of them. This is my cautionary tale to background anyone who's running for office in your communities. Okay, even if you think they're not going to win, because we live in a time where anyone can win. I promise you. This was Corpus Christi, where I used to work. Actually, this is after I left, but. This guy, Dan McQueen, came out of nowhere to unseat a super, super popular mayor. This was in 2016. And very soon after the election, all these rumors were coming out about him. So everybody started backgrounding him. And it turns out he lied on his LinkedIn is a great source for this too. If you can't get people's resumes immediately right, just look at their LinkedIn page. He lied on his LinkedIn page about his degree. Again, he went on TV and said, like, I didn't want people knowing my private life, so I just kind of made something up. Or I was like, you're mayor. Like, you don't have a private life anymore. So all this other stuff started coming out too. He hired his girlfriend as his chief of staff. He lasted 37 days in office. And then he resigned via Facebook. Yeah, like an open letter to the community. This like made national headlines, right? Like the community had to go through an expensive special election to replace him. Like this could have been avoided if people knew who he really was. I feel like. Sorry, what? No, she didn't run. I believe. Yeah, I think she was just like, y'all crazy? I'm out of here. This person did run to replace him, though. This is my favorite like follow-up story ever. So now when the special election comes around, everybody, all the media is backgrounding everyone, right? And this lady, Margaret Frotila, they got information about her. She had spoken at a Rotary Club in South Texas about her Olympic gold medal. She, it was nowhere near the Olympics. Like, I don't think she's even been a spectator there.
What did she claim to?
That is a great question. I don't remember what the medal was in. In like pathological lying. She also said she wrote a book, like a self-published book, and she said that George Bush endorsed it and all this stuff. That's an easy phone call. George Bush was like, never heard of her, right? So they debunked all of these things with this lady running for mayor.
This was after the guy.
Yeah.
Wow, should have got it.
This is the special election to replace that guy.
Is there something with the water here?
Has she ever held office? Like.
No. She owns a flower shop.
Are you sure?
Well, thank you. Yeah. That is a great question. They're running another election now, like a regular election, and the first guy is running again. By the way, he's
I don't
coming
know.
back.
I think Corpus Christi is a place of money and water. It's kind of
It's a great place to do.
Okay.
It's a great place to be a reporter. Yeah. I have actually one of our members does a really great talk about doing a 15-minute background check at our conferences. And she gives her own cautionary tale where she did a story about this guy who started a nonprofit, and he was a vet, and it was like this Christian nonprofit this was to help wounded vets. Turns out he was a sex offender. It's like the worst thing that can happen to you, right? And she had to do a follow-up story saying like, oh, and he was like this crazy like white supremacist gun collector guy too, like illegal guns and stuff. Like he was like the worst kind of person. She'd done this story about like, look at this great charity. So it was like just the worst thing that can happen. It makes me feel, gives me that feeling in my stomach, like, oh, I want to avoid that. So background people in your stories. Yes.
Question. So, I work a lot on immigration, and so sometimes like status is something like if you go into a background check, you might find out that this person is undocumented. How can you make sure, like, and you don't want to necessarily reveal their status because you know that ICE is ramping up and they're just like going into communities. Like, how can you make sure to just like even like inform your editor and be like, hey, this is something that, like, do you do that? Do you just like keep it quiet, or?
That's such a touchy. I just feel like it's such a case by case thing. Like you should know, no matter what, right? You should do the checking and know what it is, and talk with your editor about the situation. Like I would always be open with my editor, and then you can talk through like, does it have anything to do with this story, right? What should we include and what should we not include? Because you might find out all kinds of things about people, and you just have to make a decision with every story about what actually affects your story and what's important to include. Yeah. All right. So the next thing to talk about here is just generally good habits, right, around the newsroom. Things to make part of your routine. And I use, like, Google Calendar runs my life. I don't know about you. It's like, I mentioned making calendar items to follow up for things. I make calendar items to do these types of things in my daily work. And it actually works wonders. Like when the Google Calendar pops up and it's like, hey, check the lawsuits today, right? Do your court check. It actually really helps me. So make your calendar items to check for things like lawsuits, or you can make Google alerts or use different tools to make alerts also. But check for lawsuits involving like your government agencies, your government officials. You want to know if like police brutality lawsuit is filed. So checking your local courts, the federal courts. If you're in a state where you can get internal affairs investigations, just put in a records request for those once a month or every couple of months, depending on what you think is good. Always try to get audits. Audits are just like financial investigations, right? They can be pretty dry, but they can also be pretty juicy. There could be really good stuff in audits that most people aren't looking at. Regulatory actions and lawsuits for the businesses that you cover. If you have refineries, chemical companies, large factories, things like that, look at those violations that come up in OSHA or your state environmental agency, EPA, whatever. Think about like whatever regulation covers that thing and keep an eye on it. FOIAs, what I mean here is like FOIAing the FOIAs. Do you guys do this?
Yes.
Yes? Have you found good stuff in it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I love it. When I was a City Hall reporter, I would, probably like every couple months. It's like usually.
Well, it was something that was going on with the school system, and we put in a freedom or an open records request about something and they were dragging their feet. So we put in an open records request about the open records.
Oh, yeah.
And it ended up turning into a lawsuit.
Oh, wow, yeah. No, that's a good one too.
Yeah, it was
You
It's fun.
request all the information about your request.
Yeah.
Yep. You can also request all of everybody else's requests. Usually they keep this in a spreadsheet, so it's super easy to get, and you can see what other people are interested in, right? Like sometimes it's your competition, but a lot of times it's attorneys or other activists, nonprofits looking for information. It's also a shortcut because you can say like, I want everything that you gave Denise last month, whatever, and they have to give it to you. They already pulled it together, right? So they have to give it to you pretty quickly.
And that sometimes they'll give it to you at a discount if somebody else.
Will they?
Yeah.
That's
Well, at least they wanted to.
yeah. It totally depends on the agency, how well you know them. But yeah, I do have friends who like their stories were stolen this way too. So your personal ethics, think about that. But it is a good way to keep an eye on what is out there and shortcut to some records. Campaign finance. Keep an eye on that for whatever it is you're covering, state legislature, local campaign finance stuff. When I worked in Texas, we had paper records for the local people, right? Like city council and county commissioners and stuff like that. So it was really hard for people to get this information. And we made a database. Mostly it was like me at home on my couch typing this stuff, or we would get temps to type it in. We made a database, and it was the second most used thing on our site. People love seeing this information, and for you to make it publicly available, especially if you're in a place where it's not available very easily. Local campaign finance is good stuff. Keep an eye on legislation, legislative disclosures, things like the financial disclosures the legislators have to do. Legislators have to file. Know these filing periods. You'll get to know like the campaign finance periods or the financial disclosures. Make yourself those calendar items and go get them. When you start to build habits of all of these, you can see patterns in things. Also, like when you start to check like the court records every week or these legislative disclosures, you can see like, oh, hey, like seems like so-and-so got a lot of money this year over last year. I wonder what he's doing in his business. I wonder what's happening.
We find that no set of data now is digital, or you have to do a lot of manual.
I would love to say yes, and there is more open data. Yes, things are more transparent on the surface, but it's not necessarily the things that you want. It's not necessarily the stuff that's going to make the best stories. Like I was doing some training in Michigan recently, and they have this lovely state open data site, and everything on there is like, here's a list of salamanders that exist in Michigan. This is not helpful, right? This is not investigative. So a lot of times, like this local campaign finance stuff, they don't digitize it because why would they? Like it makes it harder for you to be able to do stories and look at like who's giving money to everyone over time, right? You have to go through a million PDFs, and they know that. Like they just started digitizing the U.S. Senate campaign finance reports, like literally like the last month for the U.S. Senate. That's insane. So yeah, no, they keep a lot of records on paper still, and there's not a lot of incentive for them to be transparent a lot of times. Yeah.
What about redacted materials?
Yeah. So there's a whole hashtag on Twitter called FOIA Friday that I highly recommend. Hashtag FOIA Friday. And people share their best like redaction art on there, where it's like everything is blacked out on this page but one thing. That is a huge problem too. I feel like definitely with federal FOIA, and then depending on your state. What we're talking about is when you put in an open records request, like how much stuff can be withheld from you. And when they black it out like that, you don't even know what it is. And a lot of times you actually have to like get a lawyer and fight it if you believe it is open. But yeah, redaction is a huge issue too, just in getting information. And they can charge in a lot of states like for that time to redact it too, to review it and redact it and all this stuff. So it's just like roadblock after roadblock. Yeah. Yeah. Open records is a big issue. Here's some examples of stories that came out of just some good habits. I love this one because it doesn't seem like a lot of money, but it's just hilarious. So this reporter in Alaska was looking at the money that legislators are paid per diem when they're in session in the legislature. There's just these, financial disclosures they have to say, like, we got X amount of money. And they're allowed to get $160 a day, which seems like a lot, really.
You have legislatures, yeah. The actual number of people it adds up.
It adds up, right? Yeah.
Per head, for everyone in the...
Right. But it's meant to, help them travel, and they have to be off of their regular jobs, and okay, whatever. But this guy was digging through them, and he found Juneau is the capital of Alaska, and there's 3 lawmakers from there, and they were taking all the per diem money. They were taking several thousand each in per diem money to stay in their home city at their homes, which is, it's one of those okay, this isn't a ton of money, but it's just why? And if you read, all of these stories are linked, by the way, if you want to read them. If you read this one, they're just well, I have to buy suits and look good, and it's just no, that is not, that's not what this is about. And that's a disclosure not that many people really think about, right? All right. Hopefully we are all curious as journalists, right? And we hear things and they make you go, what is up with that? Follow that instinct, right? Because if it's interesting to you, it's probably going to be an interesting story. So start with something that fascinates you. Start with a weird law or something that you're just why is this way? Why does this exist? Why do you do your job like that? Rundown tips. Okay, how many of you have your favorite crazy tipster who calls the newsroom every day? Or you get the jail letters, prisoner letters. We get a lot of crazy tips. Try to at least truth test the tips that you get, because you never know where they might lead to something good. So maybe at least make a phone call or do a search about the tips that you get. Ask those questions of just how much do things cost? Or why do you do things that way? Right? Just ask questions. This is my favorite lead ever, I think. So I have to actually read it to you. So this is in Massachusetts, and these reporters this is actually open data. This was available online, and they just searched the whole state check registry that I mentioned, where they're writing the checks. This is money goes out. It's all online. And the reporters just got curious about I see a lot of bottled water at all these meetings that I cover. How much does our state spend on bottled water for people to drink in meetings? And at the time, too, a lot of states, Massachusetts was facing this huge budget shortfall. So their lead was, if you're going to tackle a $500 million budget drought, you better first be hydrated. Oh, yeah. So they found more than $250,000 in 5 months on bottled water. Bottled water. Right. Let's just listen to this. What? What? Why are they spending that much money? But no, who thinks about water? Right? These expenses add up. It's like those per diems. They add up.
Well, my town in Massachusetts banned bottled water.
Hey, look at that.
Single use. Can't be sold.
Yeah. So, can't be sold in grocery stores or anything? Oh.
Not in big areas.
Wow.
It's an environmental night.
Yeah, that's pretty intense.
I have a question.
Yes.
How do you find out if something's unusual? So sometimes I'm going through my village's check register and things seem unusual to me, and I'll follow up on them, but how do you, without having to check the check registers of all the suburbs around me, how do I find out if that thing's unusual?
That's such a great question. That's a great question. What we did, so I worked in Corpus Christi, and we had a list of 7, we call them our benchmark cities. So we didn't check every city, but we would say here are cities that are the same size as us and very comparable to us, and we would check it in those places. So it's kind of a shortcut to not have to check everything. You can also just see where do you rank if it's easily available for something, where do you rank in the state, things like that. But if you're calling about how much you spend on bottled water, yeah, make that list of the cities that you call every time. Yeah. All right, this one's running down a tip, and this story did take quite a while, but it's a really great example of taking one tip that led to a good story and then turning it into a Pulitzer Prize later down the road. This guy right here, this is Daniel Gilbert, and he worked at the Bristol Herald Courier in Virginia at the time, and he was covering, there was a lot of oil and gas drilling activity there. And he got a tip from a landowner that they weren't getting paid their royalties, which is, like, that could be a story, right? And so get the court documents, this guy's not being paid, bad oil companies. But what he did was also run down, like, his question then was like, I wonder if there's other people who aren't getting paid, right? He was just curious, like, is it a bigger problem than this one guy, right? So he gathers all the court documents, and he was at a small newspaper, and he did spend, like, a lot of his own time doing this, but he was able to run down, like, basically the total mismanagement of all of these royalties that were owed to landowners. And he won the Pulitzer Prize for that, for public service, which was amazing. Daniel also, he used part of his money to give a fellowship for rural reporters to come to our boot camp and learn data stuff. He's amazing, awesome guy. Any Kentucky people? This is the Kentucky Center for Investigative Reporting in Louisville, one of my favorite nonprofit outlets. And this is one of those, like, wait, what? Why is it that way? So it is state law that every county in Kentucky has to have a jailer, like, as a position. It's a job. I think they're actually elected also, and they're paid out of taxpayer money. But these counties that are colored here, there are 41 of them, don't have jails. So there's, like, nothing for this person to even do. But it's like this archaic state law that's just there, and, like, no one ever called them on it, right? Like, why do you have these? Those are the things that can make an impact too. So FOIA, we had some FOIA questions earlier, open record stuff. My advice is, I know it's tough. I know you're going to run into roadblocks. You're going to run into a lot of costs. Still use it constantly. Like, it is the best tool that we have for getting this information. And we have to kind of keep those wheels greased as best we can as journalists. And because it does take a lot of time to get records, my advice is to keep a lot of them in the oven. Just put out your records requests constantly so that you can have them coming back constantly as well. So just putting one in and waiting for it to come back. Because a lot of times they do take a lot of time. So when something is happening, say that company's coming to town and there are tax incentives on the table, I FOIA the contract. If they don't give it to me immediately, which is, like, it's so public, they really should. But if they don't give me records immediately, I like to put it in my story, like, I have asked for these records. So that my audience knows, right? Like, I have asked for these, I'm doing my job, watching out for you. I also like to go into my requests. This can be hard depending on what agency you're dealing with, but I like to go into it with the idea that these records are open. I am entitled to them. Give them to me, right? But you have to tell me if you think that these records are not open. You have to tell me why. Tell me the exact statute that you were using to redact information or to withhold it altogether. Make them jump through those hoops. Keep yourself organized here. Calendars rule my life, and spreadsheets run my life. I love to keep just a spreadsheet of all of the FOIA requests that I have out. For your whole newsroom, it's a great idea to just do, like, a Google sheet that everybody can contribute to. You can keep track of all the requests that you have out. When are they due, so that you can bug people about them. It's just a great way to keep yourself organized. Yes?
Going back to what you said about letting them tell you why it should be existing.
Yes.
Is this something that you should try to get your lawyers to get in writing?
Oh, yes. Get everything in writing. Everything in writing, because you never know when it's going to come to a lawsuit or, an appeal, whatever process it is. And then it could eventually become a lawsuit. I would even, how you can put things in through portals on the web these days and all that, and sometimes they make you do that. I like to have everything actually in writing. I feel like those just go out into the ether. Sometimes you don't even know if they got it right. There were some agencies who I knew were going to be a pain. I would send them certified mail, snail mail, so that I knew they got it. Like, I tried to keep a paper trail of every single thing. Every conversation I had with people, every response I got. Absolutely. Your lawyer, well, thank you. Sometimes you have to be your own lawyer too, right? And you can use all of that to say, this was the exemption that they said, and here's why I believe that they are wrong. Yeah, other questions? Yeah.
10-second FOIA story.
Yeah,
So as our city government and city council, the city council was discussing the city manager's draft strategic priorities for the year, and they refused to give it to us, even though they were all looking at it and they were all handing around, all discussing it. They wouldn't give it to us. So I asked her the next day, they still wouldn't give it to us, so I FOIA'd it. And in the strategic priority was open and transparent government.
That is so good. That is so good. Every year, IRE does we call it the Golden Padlock Award, and it's for like the worst offenders about public information. There's some good stuff out there. We had one this year that reporters had FOIA'd text messages from this, I think it was a city councilman in California. Dude threw his cell phone in the ocean. And he was like, oh, I dropped it, was his official response to the FOIA. Like, it fell in the ocean. These things happen. There's crazy, crazy public officials. Yeah.
So you, FOIA plus audits, you said.
Yeah.
One time I went to a press conference about an audit of our state health and human services, and the HHS people were like, we agree with the audit. We're so happy about the audit. And I was like, that doesn't seem right. So I FOIA'd the emails, and it turns out that the audit had been done under the previous administration, but was being presented under the new administration. And when I got the emails and the documents attached to the emails, they gave me the track changes document of all of the changes that they had done on the final audit report, showing all the ways that they had basically said, well, you know, here was the explanation. We agree, our department's fucked. We agree, we did everything wrong. And so I was able to show that the governor and the new HHS secretary was lying.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you FOIA'd emails and all the attachments with
Right.
the emails? Yeah. Emails are the best. People say they don't think about that they're public. They just don't. And they say things in emails that you just like. I try to act like mine are public too and never say anything crazy in email. Yep. So keep your spreadsheet, keep track of your FOIAs for your whole newsroom, because you gotta bug people. Set your calendar reminders also to follow up, and try not to let things drop through the cracks. I know that's tough, but I know some reporters who actually, they set up like the first half hour of my day is literally just to bug people about FOIAs, and they'll send an email every day to the same person until they get what they want. Like, you just have to be a pest sometimes. Data, we've mentioned this several times, one of my favorite tools. The way to be able to use it quickly in a lot of situations, even breaking news situations, is to build yourself a good arsenal of some databases that can help you very quickly. Like, sometimes it's unexpected and you have to go get something, but these are some examples of databases that you can just get now, and then you can have them on hand that can give you context in a lot of stories or help you with breaking news. Calls for service, which like 911 calls for service is what I mean here. So you can quickly look up, there's a murder at an address. You can look up how many times have the cops been called there in the last 2 years, for example. Audits and annual reports, always get those. Phone directories and org charts. Maybe not necessarily data per se, but great things to have on hand, because you want to know who to call, who is in charge, and have all their numbers in any situation that might come up, a flood or a fire or whatever it is. Voter registration rolls. Totally public. You can get this data in your state. States give out different types of data, but think about everything you put on your voter registration. You can get cell phone numbers. You can get people's addresses. I've seen states give out email addresses of people with their voter registration rolls. So think of it as like a source Rolodex, right, of regular people. You can go to that and find people to talk to, in addition to doing different analysis stories of voter registration as well. Things like accidents. When some big accident occurs, there's a fatality, you can use this database to go back and look and say how many accidents have occurred at this intersection over the last couple of years. Is it a dangerous intersection? Should something be done? If you have these on hand, you can go look at that quickly. Things like budgets and payroll can also allow you to do to add context very quickly to a story. I'm going super quick now because I think we're actually technically out of time, but I'm gonna keep going until someone kicks me off. Boards and commissions, don't overlook those because those people can be in charge of various things. One of my favorite calls for service stories. A TV station did this, and then people were doing this all over the country, looking at what address in my city are the most calls for service. Where do the police have to go most often? And the answer everywhere is Walmart.
Yeah.
Walmart, right? Because they call the police if someone steals like a $2 pair of socks. Such a good story about resources. All right, another good Texas story. The Texas Alcohol and Beverage Commission, ABC, are in charge of regulating alcohol in Texas. This is a good example of looking at travel funds. It's a great thing to FOIA, looking at what do they spend on travel. This is the Texas ABC, and they made this, by the way. The Texas Tribune did not make this illustration. The Texas ABC did. This is them, like the officials drinking Lone Star beer in a plane. They were on their way to, I think that was Hawaii. They go to all these crazy like conferences and drink beer and whatever, and they're the ABC. Very, very soon after this story came out, the Texas legislature banned this agency from traveling out of state at all. It was really egregious. All right, also, remember I'm going to give you all these links, so you don't have to write all these down, but free tools. We all need free open source tools, right? These are some of my favorites. Document Cloud. Does anyone use Document Cloud in here? A couple people. Amazing tool. It used to be housed at IRE, and now it's merging with Muckrock, actually. What it is it allows you to upload documents, so PDFs, and it will make them searchable, analyzable, and annotatable. So you can, it's a big word, but you can actually like put notes in a document and then embed it in your website. And it's totally free for journalists. I'm logged in here.
So you're saying it does like OCR, tries to register the characters so you can see
It does,
search.
yes.
Sweet.
Yes, I know. It's really nice. And then you can also make notes for your readers. So if they want to read the whole like 50-page lawsuit up there, you can. Or they can, but you can also put notes about like, this is where I got this quote, or this is where so-and-so said this, and so they can skip to the good parts of it as well. Great way to be transparent with your audiences and totally free. For data that you get in paper form or PDF form, Comet Docs and Tabula are two of my favorite free tools for transforming that back into an actual database so you can analyze it. We spend hours at our conferences talking about converting PDFs into searchable and analyzable data. So those are some good free tools. For taking that data and making it into something cool that people can use on your website, Tableau Public is probably my favorite one it's totally free for the public version. And you can make maps, charts. There is a learning curve, but once you get over that, like you can do it pretty quickly in just a few minutes. No programming needed. Timeline.js and StoryMap.js are super awesome tools from the Knight Lab that you can take. They give you a Google Sheet template and tell you how to fill it out and everything. And you can make timelines or story maps that are all completely interactive and embeddable in your website. I'll give you an example here. So they are completely interactive. Also, again, no coding. Like you just fill out the spreadsheet with, here are the photos. Here it is. It's kind of taking a while to load, but you can flip through all of the stories, photos. You can embed videos, audio, all kinds of things. Want to play with that. Here are, if you want to do these data things, this column costs you lots of money. These are the free equivalents of it. So if you want to do like spreadsheets, Google Sheets does everything Excel does for totally free. Plus you can collaborate with it. If you want to do data visualization, you don't need Adobe and all that. You can do Tableau or a million other things. Let me give you some free resources also. I will point out on the IRE website, we do have a member paywall to get tip sheets. We collect tip sheets from all of our conferences, all of our workshops. We have over 6,000 of them. They're a really great place to start when you are trying to do a story like this. But these two links right here are our most recent ones. They're not really advertised on our website, but they are there. And it's the links from our two most recent conferences. So all the tip sheets from our data conference, NICAR 18, and from our IRE 18 conference in June are all up there. So you can use those links to get IRE resources for free. If you do want to become a member, as Steve said, $70, and we have all of these resources online, tip sheets, story recipes, you name it. Here is, I'm almost done.
Well, no. The bad news is this time's up here. The good news is there's not another session in this room.
Oh, okay, good.
So
Good.
you can slow down and you can stay for the next hour unless you have another session you want to go to.
All right. Well, yeah, there are other sessions elsewhere, though. So I will give you guys this link really quickly. These are the slides right here, this bit.ly. This is my email if you want to reach out about anything. If you want to ask about, brainstorm about like what data is available and something you're covering, please get in touch. We will help you out. And I mentioned the backgrounding checklist that I wanted to get you guys as well. Let me get a link for that really quickly. There it is. So this is like the start of a checklist. It's in a Google Doc, and it's basically like, start with Google searching the person. Here's a bunch of other search engines. Do you guys want to see my favorite tool to find people, just real quick as a bonus? FamilyTreeNow.com was started as like an ancestry website, but you can find, whoa, that's not his own name. You can find people in here for totally free, find their cell phone numbers, every address they have ever lived.
Is it just the US?
Yeah. Well, I would say probably yes. Although there could be other stuff snuck in here.
You can find that.
Yeah.
Maybe not on the screen.
Yeah, right? This one's me. You do kind of have to know, like, this is me and this is when I was born.
I was thinking the same.
There are other...
Like, damn.
There are other Denise Malans, believe it or not. But this is me, and these are all my relatives. That's my mom, my brother, my sister, my dad, my grandpa. This is every address I have ever lived, even like dorm rooms, my parents' house. This is my cell phone number.
Oh my goodness.
Totally free. I know, totally free.
Somebody should do a story on this.
People have, and the hook was you can opt out of it. I'm trying not to tell people that too much because I like it. It's called FamilyTreeNow.com. And these are other links about like searching businesses and property, searching for courts. I will give you a link to it. Let me, yeah. It's FamilyTreeNow.com/opt-out. I think opt-out. All right. Made you guys a bit link real quick. I'll put it in here. Not that one. Yep, that works. Just testing it there. Yeah. Lion IRE BG, which I just made up. Try that and make sure it works for you. All right. Yeah.
I have a question about 911 calls. Are those open even if your 911 service is a private service?
Yeah. They absolutely should. Now, there are some states where they will mask various information in it, but you should be able to. Where do you live? Illinois. You should be able to get it. You should be able to get everything on.
Would you go to the company, the 911 company itself? Or where would
I
you
would go to like the agency that oversees. So if they are contracted with your sheriff department, go to the sheriff department.
Okay.
Yeah, you need to FOIA the public agency that is contracted with them.
Okay.
But yeah, just because for 911 calls or other things, like if they're contracted with, if a private business is contracted with a public agency to do public business, you can get information about it. Through the actual public agency.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, sure. Anything else?
I think
I have one more in the back.
Earlier that constant FOI could sort of wear down an agency where they might actually relent to providing information.
Yeah.
Are there other techniques that you know of to sort of get a municipality or agency to get with the program?
Your lawyer. It depends on the agency. There are some that are just like it is their mission to not give you information, right? Like, do you guys have agencies that you feel that way? And I don't have like a magic silver bullet or anything like that. But I would say I used to just CC my attorney. Do you guys have attorneys who are at least like on retainer or anything? I would CC my attorney on every open records request. He wasn't reading them, he wasn't working on it, like just so they knew, like my attorney is on this, or my attorney is aware of this. So I would always let them know that. Persistence.
Say this is a municipality that uses not responding as a
Yeah.
technique.
Then you gotta appeal everything. You gotta be persistent. The worst thing we can do just as a whole is to let it drop. Because then you teach them like, yeah, you can do that. And I've done it, we've all done this because we get busy, but persistence is just the best thing. So if they're not responding, you appeal it. And what state do you live in?
Massachusetts.
Yeah. You guys might have a provision that if they don't respond within a certain amount of time, that it's open. I don't. Do you?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
This is pretty close.
Yeah. Some states have that. Use whatever you have in the law. Like, use it. Be persistent. That's my best advice.
An example just related to that. I know
Yeah.
people have questions. I'm dealing with the police department that won't release anything. And so what we're doing is my editors, one went had a meeting with the mayor and one had a meeting with the police manager because they're very image conscious, whereas the police chief is not. And so we're using other people within the municipality who maybe are more image conscious than the They also both claim, I didn't know that they weren't helping you. So whether or not that's true, now everybody knows that they're not.
Yeah. If there is a way around them, use that way. Like,
See if it works.
yeah, it doesn't always work, or there might not always be another way. But if they share information with another agency, there's someone more friendly that you can get it. Try that. Yeah.
Write about their recalcitrance because that will shame them. That works.
Yes.
You know.
Transparency issues are super newsworthy, right? If it's something like, it could be everything from a tweet to like writing a full story about it. We did in Texas, because we were frustrated all the time, we did an annual FOIA story. Like, this is the state of FOIA in our area. And we would look at like, what are they charging records for anyone, for members of the public, right? Like, people actually care about these, right? We found cases where they, like, our city was charging $800 to an ex-employee to get their own personnel file. $800.
The city I'm dealing with, I'm sorry, they even if you're a victim of a crime, you have to select your police report.
Yeah.
You can't walk into the police station with a copy of the trying to
It's,
chip
the,
away.
it's like one of the most public records that there is.
I
Right? So you,
don't see just that.
Yeah.
I think just that's a story, but how do I not make a story inside of Leading Rail? How do I make a story of that for this?
Perhaps maybe add it also, like find two of the people who are there with us.
I would start with FOIAing all the FOIAs and thinking about it, right? Because those are all your sources that you can find who are mad about it.
How much do they
who are-
collect
Yes.
in those fees?
Yes, absolutely. How much of a cash cow is that for them? Which is probably like they're doing it to set up roadblocks and make money off of people. More money off of people living. Right. Yeah.
It's typically like the 5 o'clock session, it's all about public records.
Yeah. You guys, yeah, you guys should totally go to Miranda's session. All right. Well, we had another question. I'm sorry. I totally.
No, I was just going to say that what you touched upon, that if they refuse to give it to you, you do a story on that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's what I did in the municipality I was working at. We were just not following the law, just not following the rules. And then we did a story on that, and then the county got involved and said, you can't do this, you have to give them this information.
Yeah.
But I was also going to say, you said about spreadsheets, having things in spreadsheets. This summer, it was middle of July, which is the holiday period in Norway. Nothing was happening, nobody was picking up the phone because everybody was on holiday. And I just, out of sheer boredom, looked through my spreadsheets. Please let me try to get a story done. And suddenly I saw that the local music festival was not on the list of applying for government grants to keep running. And I discovered that they weren't on the list, and I called the department, and I actually found someone at work. And they said, oh, well, we never received an application for it. And I called the leader, and it turned out that they had forgotten to send in the application. So the festival had to shut down.
Oh man.
It's a very, very, very big festival in the area, so I had a big story.
Because you had that spreadsheet on hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super story. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you.
I'm happy to stick around and talk to you.